Welcome, everybody. We are going to be discussing a very important topic after this year of collective loss, when so many people have lost jobs, they've lost their normal routine, lost the chance to be with grandchildren or the chance to be with older senior residents of nursing homes, that kind of thing, but also people who have lost people. And so I'm going to be discussing a very simple tool that has been proven to be helpful as a healing tool for loss. So I'll be sharing my screen. So we're looking at expressive writing for healing today. And when we think of writing for healing, it's nothing new. In the 60s, Ira Progoff, a PhD psychologist, studied journal writing and used it in his practice. And he developed a seminar called Intensive Journal Workshops. So he was already using this long before I ever used it myself, but he found a therapeutic benefit to writing through some of what we are working through. If you have a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper or your computer word program, we're going to do a little modified version of one of the exercises he would use with his clients, just to kind of warm up our brain cells. And he would actually have his clients come up with 20 milestone moments from birth to now. And I'm going to have you come up with 10 milestone moments. And what I mean by milestone moments is there are certain memories in our mind that are they come to the forefront very easy. They're very vivid. And it may be, some of them may be a little bit silly, or you don't know why they are milestone moments, because when I look back to the milestone moments, one of my first memories was age 4, and I had gotten a little toy broom from my parents, and we were very poor, so that we didn't get toys too often. And for whatever reason, I remember vividly throwing it down into this ravine and then asking my brother to go get it, and he wouldn't, and nobody went and got it. And I could just stand up there at the top of this ravine and see my toy broom. So that's one milestone moment, because it's such a vivid memory. And of course, a lot of us have milestone moments that would involve the birth of a child or a graduation ceremony or a wedding. But I want you to take about 3 minutes, because we want to do this quickly. 3 minutes, because we don't want to think too hard on it, to jot down 10 milestone moments from birth to now. Go ahead and go. So your time is up. That was about 3 minutes. And taking a look at your 10 milestone moments from birth, you might, until now, you might notice that they're either very good memories or very bad memories. And that's why they stick out on our minds. So evidently losing my broom at age 4 was a traumatic moment for me because that's one of my most vivid memories. So what Dr. Prognoff would do at that point is have his clients look at those milestone moments and choose one. And from that one, which you can do this later, he would have them expand on it, write more about it. What do you remember scents? Do you remember, was there a cool breeze blowing? Do you remember just delving into that moment and that milestone moment and maybe working your way through it a little bit for, you know, why was this a milestone moment? So that is one exercise you can do. And then you can take those moments, choose one, and journal on it, expand on it if you need prompts to start a journaling practice or a writing practice. The person we know more for expressive writing is Dr. James Pennebaker, who in 1990 started doing some research on therapeutic benefits of writing. Now, Dr. Pennebaker was going through kind of a time during his life when he was not necessarily really happy with his job. He was a little dissatisfied with his personal relationships, and he just was not feeling real happy right then. And he got up one morning and he just started writing out some of what he was feeling. And he did that for 4 or 5 days in a row. And he noticed something. He noticed that he was feeling a little bit better about his job situation, feeling a little bit better and getting along better with his spouse. So he wondered at that point, is there something to this? Is there something to something as simple as writing? And so he did in his college class with college students a little experiment. And he had half of the group follow this basic writing assignment. Over the next 4 days, write about your deepest emotions and thoughts, about emotional upheaval that's been influencing your life. Let go and explore that event and how it's affected you. You might tie it to your childhood, your relationship with your parents, people you've loved or love now, or even your career, and write continuously for 20 minutes. So half of the class was assigned to do that. The other half of the class was assigned to just write about whatever they wanted to. And there was some tears happening in his classroom, which probably made him a little bit nervous. Who wants to make their students cry? But within a day or two of this assignment, he had students coming up to him after the assignment, telling him what he had experienced. They were experiencing the same thing. They were feeling a little bit better about their life, or they had worked their way through some of these things. And he followed these students for 3 months and discovered that the students who had written for those 4 days, 20 minutes a day about these kinds of experiences were visiting the health center, the student health center, less. So he started to see there might be something to this. And he did the same writing assignment for men in their 50s who had recently been laid off at a factory, a big factory or a workplace in the area. And these men in their midlife were working through some tough stuff. They'd lost a job in the middle, in midlife. So he had half of those men write about what it was to lose a job at their age, what was happening at home, what was going on in their lives with it, and the other half just to write about everyday things. And a large percentage of those men who were writing got jobs before their peers who were not writing. So he did more research, and other people were doing research on the same thing, because this just sounds too simple, doesn't it? He did find that it did not matter whether you were writing about good things or bad things, but that in your writing, you were looking for some kind of meaning. What will it mean? What will this job loss mean for me? What am I going to do after losing this person? Or using the words like I discovered, or I'm understanding things now, or what can I do? Just working your way through something and doing some contemplative thinking. Now, Dr. Edward J. Murray just thought this is too simple. There can't be something to this. And so he started doing his own studies. And on the front page of March 7th, 1991 New York Times, he concluded from his own research in the same expressive writing that writing seems to produce as much therapeutic benefit as sessions with a psychotherapist. So there is something that science is showing and that research shows to this idea of utilizing writing as a way of working through things and as a way of that has therapeutic benefits to us. Louise DeSalvo, in her book, Writing as a Way of Healing, she was interviewing and people who were going through cancer treatment, people who were undergoing different things in the hospital, and having them take time to write. And she concluded it's not really what you write or what you produce that's important. It's what happens to you while you are writing. So there is some real science behind this. Now, when I started doing some of these workshops and encouraging people to write their way through things, I actually had a woman get up and leave during one of my workshops. And when I caught her in the hall, she said, everybody that's reading or sharing what they're writing about, it's all the bad stuff. They're sharing, it's so sad. She says, I don't want to remember this stuff. I don't want to remember that I lost my child at birth, that she had a stillbirth. I don't want to think about the fact that one of my children ended up in a mental ward. This is tough stuff. I want to think about happy and good things. And that made me think, well, am I harming people by having them write about some of this stuff? Because it is, when we are writing about some things, we are kind of reliving it, aren't we? And so I looked into the science behind it, and I discovered something that just kind of blew my mind away. I discovered that every single cell in our body holds memories. And what that means is, even if we don't want to think about it, that tough stuff is our body is holding on to those memories. And so I had kind of wondered why I had lost my husband in 2012 after a heart stent surgery. And I had kind of wondered why, before I read this about cellular memory, why it was March that he died, why in February or April or March, repeatedly, year after year, was I ending up in an emergency room with what felt like a heart attack. And once I understood this about cellular memory, it all made sense that my body, no matter how good I thought I was doing, no matter how I thought I was dealing with the death of my husband, my body was remembering, and I was reacting to that. So my children wondered why on earth their mother, who never does selfies, would share on her blog this horrible, awful picture of herself in that emergency room. It was because I knew I was going to be writing on my blog about what happens to us, what happens to our bodies, why we might have headaches, why we might have stomach aches, why we might end up in the emergency room more than once thinking we're having a heart attack. My grandson's cancer had returned in March. My husband had a heart attack in March. 7 years after that March that we discovered little Jacob's cancer had returned, 7 years after my husband had a heart attack and stent surgery, 7 years after my husband died, 7 years despite a job I love and many exciting things happening in my life, my body still remembered. And so I knew that writing could help us work through some of this. If we hold it in and we don't write about what we are feeling, we will have those headaches. We will have those stomach aches. We will wonder why every May, because our mother died in May, is so hard for us. Even if we think we're doing okay, our body is remembering. We have that cellular memory. And I knew I wanted to help people understand that, so that maybe they could understand what might be happening to them each time an anniversary rolled around. Even when you think you forgot the anniversary, your body's remembering it. So I had instinctively turned to journaling in 2012 when my husband passed away. He was a 5.5-year cancer survivor. It was unexpected. And I pulled out a journal. I had never journaled before that event happened. But I was a writer, And so maybe that's why I instinctively turned to journaling, because I certainly did not know about the health benefits of journaling at that time. I had these journals made with some coupon code, because I'm also a coupon queen, and they were free, and I stuck them in a cabinet and wasn't sure what I was going to do with them, but immediately I knew what I was going to do with them. After my husband died, I pulled them out and I started journaling. I started writing 2 days after his death. I filled 3 pages with things I'd been thankful for, that I'd had that extra 5.5 years after he died. So I turned to journaling, and then about 3 months out of grieving, I seriously wondered how anybody grieved without journaling about it, because it had helped me so much. And that's when I started looking into the science of it, and I started delving into what I had instinctively turned to was something that can help us. So why would we choose writing as a tool for healing? Because there are tools out there that can help us through our grieving. We all have tools available to us, whether it's a support group or going to see a counselor or exercising more, or whatever it is. There are tools available. And art therapy is another thing that I'm strongly passionate about. Well, writing's an easy thing to try, right? It's so cheap. It's inexpensive. You just need paper and a pen, a notebook and a pen, or your computer, your laptop. It's flexible. I carried that journal around with me everywhere I went for those first 3 months. If I was in a doctor's office, I would journal. If I was sitting waiting for one of my girls to get done with something, I'd be journaling. I'd take my youngest to the park and I'd sit there and journal while she played on the swings. So it was very flexible. I could carry it with me. It is private. At least we can make sure it's private. I didn't worry so much that one of my kids was going to pick it up until I started writing some things that were a little more personal. And then I'll show you in a minute what I did. But some people who want to get the benefits of expressive writing, but are very, very worried about somebody else seeing what they've written about, can actually rip up the pages when they're done writing them. If that's what you're worried about, or what might be holding you back. My daughter, who lost her son, had told me once, after she saw me doing these classes, you talk about the benefits of expressive writing and journaling, but I just can't do it. And I said, why? And she said, because some of my thoughts are pretty ugly and I really don't want anybody seeing them. And I said, rip them up, write it down, rip it up, burn it. I've burnt things in the sink before, lit them on a match because I like rituals. Bury it next to his gravestone, but you don't have to keep it. I choose to keep mine because I do like to look back at those first years, because what helped me then that I was writing down helps me now. And also I liked being able to see how far I'd come in my grieving, how I was able to write about things and do things that maybe I couldn't do at first. So it's very private, it's very flexible, it's inexpensive. And guess what? It requires no innate talent whatsoever. You do not have to be a writer to benefit from expressive writing. And as much as we need people, we need somebody in our life that we can share our innermost and deepest feelings with. At some point, it may get to the point where that person is carrying our burden. And we do that when we love somebody and we want to help them, and we are companioning them through grief, and we're hearing it over and over and over, because we tend to repeat things when we're grieving because we have to talk it out. We can protect them from a little bit of that. So we are protecting that person that we might otherwise be sharing with daily, or I'm not saying not to share. We need other people. People need people. But there's times when writing it out might be enough for that day. And so that journaling and expressive writing might be protecting somebody from a little bit of that shared anxiety. But please don't stop talking to the people that love you and want to help you. But once in a while, if you want to work through a little bit of it on your own, you can use journaling. So when we look at the idea of expressive writing or journaling, and I kind of use those interchangeably, there's really no rules. I'm going to give you a few guidelines to get started in it if you haven't ever journaled before. But really, there's no set rules other than that idea of, okay, it is helpful to work through things if we're not just whining and venting, but we're also using that practice of looking at it for some meaning or trying to figure out, find some answers through our writing. And remember, it doesn't all have to be journaling or expressive writing about the bad stuff. It's helpful to write about the good stuff too. What you do want to do when you are beginning a practice of expressive writing is find whatever format works for you. And if you purchase a Barnes and Noble $40 leather bound, beautiful journal like you see there in the middle of the screen, that might be a little intimidating. You might feel like your writing has to be perfect in there. So you might want to go for a notebook, which is easy, a moleskin notebook. Maybe you like pretty pages. Maybe you want the guided journals. There's a lot of guided journals out there, and my Expressive Writing for Healing does have guided questions in it. So the guided journal can kind of guide you as you are working your way through something. You can see what I'm drawn to. I had those first 3 journals with my husband's picture on, and then I started using a journal of the time I spent alone in my mother's house after her death. I took a picture of my little writing retreat there because she had no internet, no phone service. And my husband sent me over there in 2010 after she passed away to write by myself. And it was very calming. It was a place where I could just have some solitude and silence, where I could grieve. And so I'd taken a picture and I put those on journals. And then I liked the butterflies. I liked lines. I know what I like now. I know what kind of journal works for me. And I really didn't, I loved the butterfly, but I didn't like the wire bound. So I haven't purchased any more. And I think I've got like 6 more since this picture was taken. So that's what works for me. I'm drawn to the hardcovers with lines, with pretty pictures and maybe some nice sayings at the bottom of the page. And you have to find out what works for you. And maybe it will be a computer. And that's okay, except science has shown us that the actual physical act of writing is also beneficial. And that can be letters, thank you notes, journaling, whatever it is. It causes us to slow down, and we need that. And life slows down anyway when we're grieving, doesn't it? I mean, it's just like time has no meaning. The clocks broke. The morning my husband passed away, I realized all 3 clocks in the house were broken. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter. I didn't have to be anywhere for 3 weeks other than a funeral and a wake. And I was numb and grieving, and time had no meaning for me. So when other people said, hey, all the clocks aren't working in your house, do you want me to replace the batteries? I just shrugged my shoulders. Okay, what up? You know, because so by writing, we have to physically slow down. Our thoughts might come a little bit slower. We have to, and that's what we need for expressive writing. We need to slow down a little bit in our very busy lives, and that's sometimes hard to do. It's also hard to find the quiet time and the solitude for a lot of us, especially anybody who's a parent with children. My youngest was 8 years old when her dad died. And up until that point, I would get up before her to just do my regular writing. But once I started journaling after her dad died, I would just go downstairs and I'd spend time just sitting at the kitchen table. I left my door wide open, the front door, and people who loved me would just walk in. And for those first 3 weeks, they'd just open the door and walk in, and they'd find me either sitting at the table writing or sitting on a couch writing. And I was just surrounded by piles of paper when I sat on that couch. And my kids called it mom's nest. But I took the quiet time, and we need the quiet time. And now I make sure I have at least 15 minutes of quiet time before I get dressed for work in the morning, because I found that I need that. I need it each and every day, and especially if I'm going to spend any time journaling. So I told you that I spent time in my mother's empty house. Again, I had turned instinctively to something that I later found benefits us. That solitude, that quiet. She had no internet. She had no phone service. I'd light a candle. I'd set the mood. There's a Kenny G CD in that laptop that would be playing. Then I'd have my coffee. That's all I needed, is my candle, my cinnamon candle, that Kenny G, and a cup of coffee and some paper. And we might have to set our own rituals to work that writing time into our life, whether it's a candle or a CD. It's probably not Kenny G. My kids make fun of that part of it. Maybe a cup of coffee, but quiet time and a little bit of solitude we need, even if it's just 15 minutes, even if you just do this on the weekends. You have to be honest with yourself when you're using expressive writing for healing, because it doesn't help you to pretend everything's okay. It also doesn't help you to worry about who's going to see this, because at first, and we'll talk a little bit later about what you can do with some of this writing, at first it's for you. I mean, your journaling is for you, and it's not for somebody else to see. You're not going to worry about, really divulging that horrible stuff, because if nothing else, you can rip it up. It's the act of writing that helps you. But we really need to be honest with our feelings and with our thoughts, or it's not going to help us. I kind of compare it to the Facebook page, the perfect family with the perfect life, with the perfect house. And when it comes right down to it, that isn't helpful, is it? But if you are showing your real messy desk and your real messy house and stuff, you actually are helping others too, aren't you? Because it's, hey, we don't have to be perfect. Well, we don't have to be perfect in our expressive writing either. We can make mistakes. So when I tell you that I keep my journals, there are a few days when my thoughts were that I would not want my children to see them. And so I would take a piece of paper, maybe paint a little bit on it, or just make it look like I wanted that page to look like that. Well, underneath that's washi tape on there, which you can pull up easily. And my children don't know this. Now you guys do, but there's some private stuff written under there. And so I don't care if they find it after I'm gone, but I covered it just so that I'm more comfortable in writing it. So I wrote some private stuff there. I covered it up. I've looked since then, because for a while there, I couldn't remember, well, what did you write in 2018 that was so private you had to cover it up? And then I lifted it up and I thought, yeah, I'll keep that covered for now. It might not matter after I'm gone, but I really wouldn't want somebody picking it up and discovering those private thoughts, because they're private. We can be really messy in our journaling and our writing. Grief is messy. It's really messy. And so we need to ignore that inner critic that thinks, oh, but your handwriting is a mess and you just cross that out. And it can be as messy as our feelings are. And that's okay, because it's the act of writing that is helpful to you. It does help me, like I said, to look back at my journals. Some of my entries are pretty messy, but as long as I can read them and I think, yeah, you're doing a lot better, Mary, or hey, this quote that I copied down is helping me now. It helped me then. Maybe you are more of an artist type and you might actually want to doodle in your journal. That's fine too. Some people do art journals, so they're really artsy and they're painting and using rubber stamps and stickers, and that's great. But for me to get the benefit of expressive writing, I kind of have to get things down fast. And so I might not want to take the time to, and I'm not an artist either, so I don't take the time to color, but coloring can be a meditative act too, coloring and drawing. If you are a reader and you read something helpful in somebody's book, you might want to copy that paragraph down. I do that all the time. Inspirational messages, if something is inspiring to you. I've even taped things in my journal. I've taped cards, greeting cards, or a message from a friend. I've printed out an email, taped it into my journal, because I know that because I like to look at my journals later, that those messages will lift me again. So whatever it is that works for you, and you've got to find out what works for you, because you really want this journaling to be something that fits your life. Writing down words of others who have gone down that road. I am a reader, so the first thing well, not the first thing I did, but within the first week or two of my husband's death, I started picking up books to read, because I needed to know that other people who had been down that road, who had lost a spouse, survived. I needed to know that they came out on the other side, whatever that means. And so those words up at the upper left are C.S. Lewis's words from one of his books after he lost his wife. And the words down at the bottom are Madeleine L'Engle, because when she lost her spouse, she actually journaled about it too. So I was reading their books, and their words helped me, because you may have heard this from C.S. Lewis before, that perhaps the bereaved ought to be isolated in special settlements like lepers. I mean, that's what you feel like. You feel like you're living a different life than everybody else in the world, and their lives are going on, and people are living normal lives, and you are just wrapped in this cloak of grief and walking around. And I've seen people a week after they've lost somebody out in public, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how are they even walking around? And yet I did. So you just feel like you're from a different species almost. Quotations, inspirational sayings, anything that will help you, you might want to share in your journal. Writing down your dreams, figurative and literal. By that I mean you might have some dreams that feel like some kind of message to you, like maybe you'll dream about the person who had passed away, but you woke up feeling comforted. Go ahead and write that dream down. I mean, I've had dreams where it just almost felt like that person visited me. But we also need dreams for our future. What is our future going to look like without this person? And it's really hard to imagine. But if there are things in your life that you want to accomplish, maybe in honor of them or in memory of them, or you have some things you have to work out, is like, how am I going to pay the bills? Or how am I going to celebrate Christmas without this person? Then write those dreams. Well, I imagine I could do this, and write those dreams down. Or, you know what, I would like to do this in honor of that person. And so that's one of your dreams that you could write down. So I want you to write down both your figurative, the real literal dreams that you have at night, if not all your dreams. I mean, because I get some pretty weird dreams. But if there's a dream that really struck me as, hey, while I'm asleep, I kind of worked that problem out. And this is how I'm going to handle it. Sometimes dreams are a way of working a problem out. So write down your dreams. You're going to want to write down what you're grateful for. And you've probably heard of gratitude journals or gratitude jars. It takes practice to become a kind of person who can find gratitude even in the bad stuff. But I instinctively did that 2 days after my husband died, because the whole first 3 pages of that journal was what I was thankful for. No one told me to do that. If they had, I probably would have slapped them, because who wants to have somebody tell you, well, write down what you're grateful for. But what happens is, if we start to do that, and there's a reason they make gratitude journals, is because then that practice becomes a habit, just like anything else. So it might be a real stretch to think of something to be grateful for at the end of some of our days. But it might be the cashier smiling at us in the grocery store. It might be a stranger opening the door. It might be very simple things, as somebody brought you a meal. That's kind of a big thing. But if we can start doing that, then we are building up that practice, and everything takes practice, right? Any new skill that we want. So if we're not naturally grateful, it's a skill we can work on. And now I just naturally do that in my journal. Each time I journal, I try to find one thing to be thankful for, or before I go to bed, one thing to be thankful for that day. And I try to start the day with gratitude too, because then we'll start seeing it in our life. We will start seeing things that we can be grateful for, even in the darkest days. Those little tiny pinpricks of light that we see in those dark days. The things, the strangers. I mean, it doesn't always come from where we expect, which is our families, right? That somebody reaching out might be a total stranger. There's some benefits of expressive writing specific to people who may want to get some of their writing published. If you have a blog and you want to share some of your journal entries, or at least use your journal entries as a starting point, it could end up being a blog post. There are magazines and anthologies. Think of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. I've been in 10 of them. A lot of what we go through, other people can identify with. And if we find something good in it, or we have a point that comes out of our stories, because you all have stories. Every single one of you has stories. You are here because something in your story in your life brought you here and appealed to you. We can share some of our stories to help other people. Maybe sometime, someday, parts of what you are journaling about will be incorporated into a book. And if you wonder why in the world would anybody ever want to share any of their personal stuff, well, the only way we can help others is by sharing our stories. So only by lifting others will you yourself rise. It helps us to help other people. And our stories and our experiences can help other people. So these books, I mentioned both Madeleine L'Engle and C.S. Lewis, were actually private journals of those authors. And C.S. Lewis, in his A Grief Observed, wrote about his wife, Joy. He never got this published in his name until after he saw how it was helping people. So at first it was not published in his name. And he didn't use her name in the book because it was too painful for him to even write her name, which was Joy. And Madeleine L'Engle, she wrote and published a series of journals. One of them is called Two-Part Invention, and that talks about her marriage, and it also talks about losing her husband. So sometimes people's private journals end up getting published as books. That's not why we should be writing in our private journal, but it's something that maybe can help somebody someday. This woman watched her son die of cancer. Her book has since become a movie. You can see she shared her actual private journal entries in the book. So there's reasons why we would share private stuff in our writing. Also, if you think about it, when she wrote, she didn't have to look back and think, well, what did I feel like on May 18th in 2013? She had it right there in her journal. So that memory's right there for her to utilize to help other people. Same with this mother, September Vaudrey, when she watched her daughter, or she lost her daughter, and she wrote Colors of Goodbye. For myself, the Refined by Fire book that Familia's published, I initially started writing it with a beautiful love scene at the front in the kitchen table with my husband looking over at me and telling me I was beautiful, yet my hair was a mess. I was in pajamas and I had no makeup on. And so I was thinking, wow, this is what our marriage became after his cancer. It became where he sees me with the eyes of the man who married me. He saw me as that 19-year-old girl. That's something that our marriage wasn't like before his cancer. But I had 5.5 years of a marriage like that. But there's going to be somebody whose spouse died who didn't have that, and who might set that book down thinking, oh my gosh, perfect marriage, perfect lady. I'm not going to read this book. You know, I've got a lot of complicated feelings about my spouse's death. So I thought, no, I'm going to begin the book with a private journal entry at 10.5 weeks, because that's going to be when a lot of people are going to pick up a book after somebody died, is about 10.5 weeks out. And I'm crying in the peanut butter aisle and bolting out of the grocery store. I'm sharing how my daughter screamed at me after Bible camp and said she hated me because I couldn't find the t-shirt she'd just made. I mean, I was embarrassed. All these mothers are looking at me. I'm a horrible mother. I felt like a horrible mother. She hated me. She even said, I wished you'd died instead of dad. And then we're bawling at the gravestone. Why would I share those private thoughts? Because our lives aren't perfect. Because I wanted people to know if they're crying in the coffee aisle, or they're pounding the steering wheel in the parking lot, or their kid is screaming at them, that's normal. Grieving is hard, it's messy. And if we share those messy thoughts and messy feelings and that mess with other people, we can help them get through the same mess. So I was blogging about grieving, and I was sharing things for probably about 18 months. I was really blogging. My housewife writer blog turned into a grief blog, and I got sick of it. My son said, I can't read it anymore, Mom. So I wanted to stop after about a year of it. And I had widows emailing me, please don't stop. I'm sending your blog entries to my kids so they know what I'm feeling. So I still will sometimes blog about grief. Poetry If you've never thought of doing some expressive writing for yourself, but you are a poet, there's some healing benefits to writing poetry. This man, Gregory Orr, felt responsible for his younger brother's death. His parents wouldn't talk about it. He was a troublemaker in high school, but one teacher recognized that pain in him and encouraged him to write. And he says, poetry saved him. So poetry is another way of expressive writing. There's actually the National Association for Poetry Therapy. So if you aren't sure that you would ever in a million years want pieces of your journal published, you might want to look into poetry therapy as a way of sharing some of those feelings. There is some ethics involved if you end up wanting to get pieces of your writing published. Lots of times your story is somebody else's story, isn't it? So my story of loss includes my children because they lost their dad. And so when I write about my 8-year-old, when I wrote about my 8-year-old, I didn't feel like I needed to get her permission because I wasn't writing anything really embarrassing other than that incident of yelling, "I hate you" in the parking lot, which she was not embarrassed of. Sometimes you need to get a permission. If you're writing about a doctor or you're writing about a nurse or somebody who's intimately involved in the person you lost life and you're publishing it, you might need to change names, fictionalize the work if you need to protect somebody. So we can write about the painful stuff, but some of that painful stuff involves somebody else, might hurt their reputation. So you just have to be careful as you're looking at, is this something I should get published? Am I going to open up the door to a lawsuit or more? So just think about the ethics if you are looking at maybe getting pieces of memoir published. This is a little exercise you can do after this class. I want you to take a piece of paper and write lie on the left-hand side and truth on the right-hand side, because we all walk around with lies and we believe the lies. And I want you to make a list of some of those lies that you tell yourself. One of them might be, I'm not going to be okay without this person. Well, what's the truth? You probably will be okay. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard, but you probably will be okay. Another lie you might be telling yourself is that you are never going to be able to celebrate or feel joy again. That's a lie. It's going to feel different and you're going to still miss that person, but you're probably going to feel these moments of joy. And I hope you do feel those moments of joy. And I did. I mean, the first time I laughed out loud and my kids stared at me horrified. Mom's laughing, but then they smiled because they do. And I felt guilty initially. It's like, oh, yeah, I just laughed and this person is gone and they're dead, but you will feel joy again. So I want you to write that lie, cross it out, and then write the truth. Because sometimes we have to work through that. And you can do this in your journal. I also want to offer you, one person will win a copy of my Expressive Writing for Healing. Just email me at marypotterkenyon@gmail.com. Subject line, drawing, and then your address, and one person will win a copy of Expressive Writing. I'm going to stop the share so we can address some of your questions or your comments.
Yeah, so we had a few questions come in before the webinar. So one of them was, do you have any suggestions on how to help children confront grief?
That is such a very important question. And it's the question I had because I had 4 children still at home when my husband passed away. And then when my grandson passed away, he left behind siblings. And children do not grieve the same way adults do. And they, up until about age 4 or 5, they really don't understand death. I mean, it's other than the bugs they saw squashed in the sidewalk, and that doesn't apply to grandpa, does it? They just don't understand. But it gets harder then because ages 5 to 6 or 5 to about age 8 or 9, they know what death is. And they don't know how to deal with it. They have not developed any coping skills. And so that's a very difficult age. And it's a time when maybe somebody outside of your home will be able to help them deal with it. It's grief is messy, but it's even messier when you're worrying about children. So I had people tell me after my husband died, well, thank goodness you have the kids at home. Well, what did that mean? It meant I couldn't cry and scream like I wanted to. I had an 8-year-old crawling into my bed for a year, and I let her because I didn't know what to do. So there are some good books out there. There's the Compassionate Friends group for parents who have lost a child, also will help you find a way for siblings to deal with sibling loss. There's no easy answers. You can't wait for my book on child loss or loss for children. 2024 it will come out, but it's the words I wanted to say to my daughter. I wanted her to know that person didn't want to leave. And that's important for that child to know, is they didn't want to leave you. It's not your fault. They need to hear that. They see people all around them crying, and they might not even know what to do with it. So it's very complicated. I did not find the answers for my daughter. I just struggled along. I have some answers now, but it's check the hospice, see if they have a support group, check. And I was told repeatedly, yeah, we do for adults. Yeah, we do for adults. Yeah, we do for adults. Churches, groups, counselors. And now I see camps popping up that will help children, like summer camps just for children who are grieving. There are resources, but you might have to dig for them.
And question that just came in is, how do you become a certified grief counselor?
That's a wonderful question. There's a lot of programs out there online. I happen to go through a grief academy. It's actually expiring this year. So I found, and there's expensive, very expensive ways. Like there's a Colorado place that for $4,000 you'll get certified after 4 different classes, and they're wonderful. There's a lot of wonderful places out there. David Kessler is starting a certified grief counseling this next month. That's what I signed up for to get, instead of getting recertified where I was certified. But there's college classes and stuff too. So the word certified just means I have a certificate. Same with certified therapeutic art coach. I have a certificate, I took some training. So there's a lot of options out there. If you Google it, you'll find it, and it varies in cost, but there's cost involved, and there's also online variations.
So another question we had is, how do you get started writing about your trauma that needs healing? Just where would you start?
If you've never ever tried journaling before, you might want a prompt journal, a journal that prompts you, gives you some prompts. And you have to get past that self-censoring where, well, I'm doing it wrong. Well, no, you're not. You're writing about your feelings. There is no right and wrong in that. But you might want to start with a prompt journal. And my journal does have some prompt questions in it, but there's a lot of different prompt journals. Use just plain notebook paper if you want to just try it and give it 4 days, at least 4 days to try it. Because the first time, if you've never tried it before, you might feel a little bit stupid and like, well, this isn't helping me any. And I've had to sell men on it more than women for some reason. I'm not sure why, maybe because women are more used to talking about their feelings. So they're more willing to try writing about their feelings. And I have had men come up to me after they've tried it for 4 or 5 days and says, I cannot believe how much this is helping me, because sometimes they don't want to burden their spouse, or the guys at work don't want to talk about it and stuff. So just writing about it was helpful to them, and they've continued the practice. So I'd say give it at least 4 or 5 days just to try it and see how you're feeling a little bit better. Do you feel different after you've journaled?
Awesome. Another question we had is, this type of work only for grieving the loss of people?
Oh no. As you noted when I was talking about James Pennebaker, it helped men who had lost their jobs. And it helps any kind of trauma experience, anything that causes anxiety, causes worry. I mean, the pandemic, I am sure we saw a lot of journals being sold when we hadn't before during that pandemic, because we were isolated. So I remember panicking, and it seems silly because I had tons of paper. I'm a writer, I had tons of paper, but I ran out of journals during the pandemic. And I was like panicking, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Well, I had paper all over the house, but I actually literally called the local bookstore and asked if they had journals for sale, and they met me at the curb and threw it into my car. And it was just like silly, but once you get into that practice, it's like you almost need to do it to work your way through things. I make sure I have a journal with me if I travel or I go somewhere.
If you like this webinar, go to familius.com for books, articles, and more content that will help your family be happy. Be sure to sign up for the Familius Habit Hub newsletter and be alerted when new webinars go live, because every family deserves to be happy.